My name is Nancy Marchand Martella, and I'm joined by Ron Martella. And today we're going to be talking about the Read to Achieve program and also Beyond the Book sort of activities. The title is Beyond the Book, Preparing Students for College and Career Readiness. And this is the third talk that we've given that has focused on aspects of Read to Achieve, but then again goes beyond that to look at adolescent literacy. So again, just to ensure everybody's on the same page, we will highlight skills and strategies that do appear in the program Read to Achieve. There are two different programs, including comprehending narrative text and comprehending content area text. But we are going to add other skills that would be important to add that are designed to prepare students for college and the workforce. And we'll specifically identify aspects that are found in Read to Achieve and then those particular skills that would go beyond the program. So we'll identify those as we show them. It's important to know that the Common Core State Standards, they're brand new, of course, English Language Arts. There is a heavy focus on college and career readiness skills, so I encourage you to take a look at the website for course standards, which is noted below. The central goal, again, is to prepare students for college and the workforce. And these Common Core State Standards do provide a roadmap of what to teach students, but they don't tell teachers how to navigate the roadmap. That's where good programs come in. So again, make sure that everyone knows that we know what the skills and strategies are that students should learn, but again, it's up to the teachers to go through and teach those skills and strategies. So that's where we can look at Read to Achieve. And the Common Core State Standards have been adopted by 45 states and 3 territories, and we've noted the states that are not a part of this as of yet. The Common Core State Standards do have a mission statement, and it is the following. The Common Core State Standards provide a consistent, clear understanding of what students are expected to learn, so teachers and parents know what they need to do to help them. The standards are designed to be robust and relevant to the real world, reflecting the knowledge and skills that our young people need for success in college and careers. And we highlighted that. With American students fully prepared for the future, our communities will be best positioned to compete successfully in the global economy. Unfortunately, we've got a problem out there with regard to adolescent literacy. And what we're finding is that students are struggling with the complex demands of reading tough text, and that would be the text found in grades 6 through 12. And when you take a look, and this is all from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, when you take a look at how 8th graders fare, it's about 2/3 of those students are really struggling with reading grade level text, and that means that they're reading below the proficient level. And it's pretty similar. It's 62% though of those students are reading below grade level, again below the proficient level in 12th grade. When you look at high school graduates, a vast percentage of them don't even have the essential literacy skills that their employers would want them to have. And many, many kids are dropping out of school, and when you either ask kids or look at data of kids who drop out, you find that their literacy skills are at the lowest possible levels. Now, when you take a look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress in terms of how they assess reading performance, you'll see that it's the kind of reading activities that we see even within state level assessments. It's reading more complex paragraphs and informational text, and then answering more complex comprehension questions related to their understanding of the passages. Now, Ron and I are both professors, so we are troubled by students coming into college and even deciding to go on to graduate school who have diminished skills in literacy. And so what you find is that more and more, I mean, that's an amazing amount of money, $16 billion spent per year by universities and businesses, because students don't even have the basic reading and writing skills. This data is very interesting. More than half of all students at four-year schools and more than 75% of students at two-year schools don't even have the basic skills to perform a complex literacy task. And by that, complex literacy tasks would be reading opinion pieces to determine what the opinions are, understanding fact from fiction, reading more complex text and drawing out the meaning of what the text is, the big ideas of text, summarization, and so forth. That students are very much having a difficult time with that. And again, that study on the 50%, that's from AIR, so I'd take a look at that if you're interested with regard to how college students are performing. And just as faculty, we're finding more and more students are coming in who have difficulties reading their textbooks. And we've had to really zoom in on what kinds of study strategies are these students not having from either their high school experiences or sooner than that. And what do we need to do to teach those skills so students can read their textbooks and be able to take tests and do well on magazine or journal articles, be able to understand them. There's a fallacy out there called the inoculation fallacy. I just find it quite interesting. There's a paper by Snow and Moya, 2010, and the title of their paper is "Why is Everyone Talking About Adolescent Literacy?" And again, adolescent literacy is defined as grades 4 to 12. We're going to really talk more about grades 6 to 12 with regard to study strategies, but this inoculation fallacy is defined as, and we'll just go through here. It's an inoculation fallacy in the sense that, like, K3 focuses on the teaching of reading, and we seem to think that grades 4 to 12, we don't need to do anything with regard to reading. And that's a problem, that reading really, the reading skills and strategies, we have to keep focusing on and teaching those skills and strategies, the point being beyond third grade. So it would be grades 4 to 12. So again, the need for literacy instruction does not end with the third grade or even in high school, that these skills have to continue, we have to continue teaching them so that students can handle the more complex texts that they're going to face. Which leads us into Torgerson's report about academic literacy, which to me, this would probably be the most important aspect of how we can make a difference in the lives of kids. So academic literacy really means that we have to do a much better job getting kids to read content area text and more complex literature, and that means fiction and nonfiction. And let me just make a point about that. That means that students need to be given access to these materials, that we need to go beyond, let's say, programs that might really focus in on lower level skills within text that might be more decodable or easier to understand. But we've got to eventually get these kids reading science and social studies text, because that's what they're going to face. And we have to be able to have them read more complex novels, because that's what they have to do in their gen ed classrooms. So academic literacy does say we have to do a better job about getting kids into these more complex materials. We have to do a better job on saying, okay, what does our state require? And to be honest, even standardized assessments, for example, like the SAT, ACT as an example. But we've got to say, okay, what kind of comprehension activities are required on these assessments, and how can we prepare our students to tackle those? And that would again be reading more complex text, determining the main idea? How do you summarize? How do you determine inferences from the text? Those kinds of things. We've got to give students increased practice on using those kinds of assessments. And this last one, making inferences, I think we tend to ask students literal questions, about the text, and what we've got to do is a much better job about having students go beyond the text. What was the author thinking here? He doesn't, or she doesn't exactly say, but there are tips in the text that would make you think that the author is going in a certain direction. What are those? And back it up with some text evidence. That's making inferences and drawing conclusions. And so if you include all three of those aspects, you are focusing on academic literacy, and that has been correlated with better performance for older kids. So here's an example. When we say authentic text, we mean it's got to look like the kind of text that they're going to see in middle school and high school. And Read to Achieve does include science and social studies text in the content area program. And what Ron and I did was we surveyed the top 5 publishers for science and social studies textbooks. And what you're going to see would be that just the setup of the chapters aligns with what these big, for example, like Glencoe or McDougall-Littell, how they set up their chapters. And so students are going to see some commonalities. They'll see words that are bold and highlighted in a lot of these different textbooks through different publishers. A lot of them have objectives at the beginning of the chapter, and then they have these assessments at the end that students can read over actually before they read the text to tip them off on what are the big ideas that they should get out of as they're reading. The varied context, students struggle with reading magazine or journal articles, and so we need to give students increased exposure to these kinds of different types of reading. Here is an example of one found in Read to Achieve. And one thing that we do is we do something called Beyond the Book. You'll see that up at the top left-hand corner. And what we require is that every so often in the program that students will shift from the lesson that they're working on, or the set of lessons that they're working on for a unit, and actually go practice their skills in different types of text. And of course what we want is for students to be able to demonstrate their skills and strategies that they've learned in the program materials in novel ways. And these are these programmed probes that happen on a very regimented basis through both the content area and the advanced narrative program. And again, that was called for when Torgerson talked about academic literacy. So what we're going to do is talk about just quickly the 5 targeted areas or elements of reading instruction. And what we're going to do is zoom in on a couple of them, just given the whole notion of focusing on getting kids ready for college and beyond. So the big 5 include word study and fluency and vocabulary, comprehension, and motivation. And if you are interested in learning more about those, we had a webinar, I believe it was last week. Everything is going by so fast. But the webinar was on these 5 components. So I would encourage you, if you want to know more, to access that webinar. But let me quickly mention what these elements are so we're all on the same page. Word study is, it goes beyond what we solidified in K3. You know, in K3 we zoomed in on phonemic awareness and phonics. And now for older kids, we're going to zoom in on multisyllabic words and sound combinations that are more complex, and those kinds of strategies for that. Fluency, again, in K3 we focused on fluency, but now we're focusing on reading quickly, accurately, and with expression, but we're ramping it up so that kids are actually practicing in more informational and higher level narrative text. Vocabulary, of course, relates to the words, and K3 there is a focus on vocabulary, But for older kids, we have to really zoom in on the kinds of vocabulary that will hinder their comprehension. And again, teachers are very, very good about, you can survey a text and pick out the tough words, and good programs will do that for you, and the words are defined for the students. Comprehension is more than just answering questions. It has to do with teaching them explicitly how to draw the meaning out of text. So they are active comp strategies that we need to teach. Again, K3 did it. We're going to do it for older kids. Motivation was not evident in K3, but it is for older readers. And if you think about it, it makes sense because students are coming in, if they are struggling in reading, they're not very motivated. And we've got to think about ways to increase their motivation. Of course, one way to increase motivation would be to have them read materials that are of interest to them. And Read to Achieve does include kid or materials that the students chose, which I think is sort of a nice twist to that. The students chose all of the materials for the narrative program, and they told us what materials they would like to read more about and things that they didn't find interesting, so we included the things they wanted. Collaboration and collaborative learning, reciprocal teaching, those kinds of aspects are important. Think, pair, share in terms of getting kids motivated, and again for older kids, so we did include motivational aspects. But what we're going to do is zoom in on two, and that would be vocab and comp. We're going to just spend more time on those because if you're really looking for a big bang for your buck with regard to getting kids ready for college, those would be the two areas that really will make a difference in the life of a kid. So let's look at element 3, vocabulary, and this would include instructional practices that focus on word meaning. In Read to Achieve, we teach not only specific words, but we teach word learning strategies. It's important that kids know that when they come to a word that they don't know, that there are a set of steps that they can follow to figure out what the word means. First, and the easiest approach, and we probably all do this all the time, you know, reading a novel and we come across a word, we might read around the word to see what the heck does that word mean. And so that would be called context clues. And we teach students that that would be your first line of defense. But sometimes that's not very helpful. And so then what you may need to do, it depends on the type of material you're reading. You may need to go to a glossary if there is a glossary in, for example, a science or social studies book, and look up that word and see if you can find it and find what the definition is. If your textbook, as an example, does not have it in there, then you need to access the meaning through a regular dictionary, print-based dictionary, or an online dictionary. And these are called word learning strategies because it's generalizable. Once you teach the student how to do this, then they can generalize it to any kind of materials that they have. Now, another way that you can do vocabulary building is through specific words, and that means that all of the words you want kids to know, you would pull them out of text, you would pre-teach them, and then you would have students you know, practice or do different activities to learn those vocabulary words to high levels. But this is much more strategy-based. Again, think college and beyond. You know, what do students do when they're reading any kind of materials? What do they do when they come across words they don't know? And so this is considered to be just good in terms of generalization. Here's a strategy. Now, we don't have it in Read to Achieve, but boy, do I like it. And I can't tell you how many times our kids have come home having to memorize. I remember our daughter had to memorize 100 AP language vocabulary words. And here's one of them. I don't know if you know logorrhea. I'll be honest, I had no idea. But what you do is you would write the word on the front of an index card, and then you would write its definition on the other side. So too much talking is logorrhea. And then what you do is you would see that if you want to flip them, and it's very important to do a flip-flop method when you're studying vocabulary, would be then to see the definition, and then in your head to say, or to a partner, would be too much talking, what is that, what's a word for that? And then you would see logorrhea. So, you know, the flip-flop method, for lack of a better label, is a good one, and that means that you take these tough words and you define them with kid-friendly language, and then as you go through the words, you see the word, you give the definition, and then you see the definition and you give the word. And it's just a nice way of solidifying your knowledge of those words. And let me make a point too about vocabulary. You want to make sure that you go beyond just simply memorizing definitions. And again, important practice would be to write those words in sentences, to perhaps draw a picture to illustrate your understanding of a word. Perhaps you keep a word log where you keep track of all the new words that you've learned in a notebook. Those are strategies that would go beyond Read to Achieve, but would be very, very important so that you're ramping up the kids' knowledge and use of tougher vocab words. And as teachers, we would need to make sure that we're using those words with the kids so that we're good role models of ramping up our language. Again, as an example like tenacity, you know, if you see a student really working hard, rather than saying, wow, you're really working hard, you know, use the word tenacity. Again, it's just modeling good and ramped up vocabulary use. Element number 4 is comprehension. And again, K3 does have comprehension in it, but these are ramped up strategies for older kids. Graphic organizers, very important. Science and social studies books use them. They're used in writing. And the reason being is that they incorporate all 3 modalities. Ron and I advocate in our classes that rather than pinpoint auditory, visual, and tactile kinesthetic aspects of learning, why not just teach using all 3 modalities? So all 3 modalities always have a see, say, do. And a graphic organizer is very helpful for that. So take, for example, the order or sequence chart. You see it, so there's a visual aspect. You would talk about it and start filling it in, and so there's the auditory aspect. And then not only would the teacher fill it in for students or perhaps with students, but when students are filling it in, that's where the kinesthetic aspect comes in. So they see it, they hear about it, and they write in it. Graphic organizers are just one of the best approaches to help organize information for students. And Read to Achieve includes all of those graphic organizers. Another important skill that we need to teach students would be that when you're reading something and you don't know what it's saying, a good strategy would be to do comprehension monitoring. And that would be if you're reading your text and you don't know what you just read, you need to stop. You need to go back and reread it, read it slower, and think about the meaning as you're reading it at a slower pace. Again, an important strategy for students no matter what level. Now, the best way to teach it is through something called a modeled think aloud. And with a modeled think aloud, the teacher would actually let the kids see what's going on in so-called what's going on inside his or her head by saying what's going on in your head. So, you know, I just read this paragraph, but I'm unsure what this paragraph is really about. I need to reread this paragraph much slower so I can think about what I'm reading. And then what you do is you model it. You go through and model reading and reading at a slower rate and pausing and reflecting on the various sentences. And then now I understand more about Nigerians because I slowed down and thought about what I was reading. So again, a good strategy no matter the level of learner. This is one that I'll be honest, find with my students in my classes, and that is on taking notes. This one has to do with taking notes out of a textbook. We teach that in Read to Achieve in the content area program. We use the Cornell approach, which would be where you would take the headings of the chapter, turn them into a question, and then those would be written on the left-hand side of the Cornell note sheet, and then you'd list what page it's on. And then on the right-hand side, you would read that section of the textbook, and then you would take notes to answer the question. Now, the nice thing about the Cornell note-taking approach is that when you're done, you can fold the paper along the line, that vertical line, and then you have a study guide. And what's nice about that is you can read the question, where is rural and urban Mexico, and then you could give the answer and then flip it and check the answer. The other thing you can do is to say financial aid and then come up with the vocabulary term subsidies. So it's a nice study strategy for students. Now, again, I find students when I say, did you take notes out of the textbook, that when you actually look at their note-taking strategies, they don't know how to take notes out of the textbook. Either they write too many notes or they didn't get the big ideas from the chapter. So that's an important one. And then lecture has to do with this lecture note-taking form. We do teach it in Read to Achieve. We have some prescribed lectures that the teachers can give, and the teacher can model what are the big ideas or main ideas of my lecture, and then here are the supporting details. It's similar to the Cornell approach, but what you find is that now the teacher's stating, here's the main idea and here's some details about my main idea, and now you can get students learning how to take notes when the teacher is providing a lecture. And as you can only imagine, obviously that's important for going to college or and beyond. Summarization is an important strategy, and this one also has to do with the notion of determining main idea. A lot of the standardized assessments will ask for what's the main idea or which main idea best illustrates the passage. And so we teach and Read to Achieve summarization by doing the GIST strategy. And the GIST says if you see step one, whom or what is the excerpt about, and the student would write that down in the step one column. And then what was the most important thing about the whom or what, and they would write that in the box. And then they would combine step one and step two into a main idea statement. And what we do is say it needs to be written in 20 words or less. And so that's why we provide the blanks there, that students are going to be forced into brevity. Otherwise, you get into these long, drawn-out summarization statements, and students just really don't know how to narrow it down. We do a lot of modeling of this in Read to Achieve, and then, of course, the modeling is stated to where students are developing a GIST on his or her own. Now, this one goes beyond Read to Achieve, but just to make an emphasis about it, and it kind of makes me smile when I see this, because our daughter is a freshman now in college, and she would fight us on schedule books. I keep it all in my head, you know. And I just had to smile. Well, guess what? Now she has a schedule book, and now she highlights things in her schedule book, and she uses sticky notes. And I said, you watch, you'll find it really reinforcing to write all the things that you have to do today down on a sticky note or in your schedule book. And as you do them, you mark them off. And so it's funny that she's doing that and says, now I'm not forgetting anything. So I would recommend the use of schedule books and starting those early. I know teachers who even start in like 3rd or 4th grade. I think it's great. It's just such a good skill to have. So you write down your assignments. If you can use syllabi in high school level classes, it sure is nice, because students are going to be hit with syllabi as soon as they walk in as a freshman in college. And it would be nice to have some level of alignment with high school as an example. And teaching kids to cross off items as they complete them, of course, is reinforcing. I'll be honest, I write things down just to cross them off because it makes me feel good. So again, teach kids that strategy. And then prioritize. What do I have to do today? What do I have to do tomorrow? Oh, I got this done today. Could I do a little bit of what I have to do tomorrow today, given that I want to go to a movie or that I've got a soccer game or something to go to? So teaching kids how to prioritize is certainly important. We have to teach students study and test-taking strategies. And again, these will go beyond Read to Achieve that we would recommend teaching kids. Highlighting is an important one. And it's rather tough to teach highlighting when you've got a science or social studies textbook because those books are reused year after year after year. So that would involve either workbooks or something where the students can learn to highlight. But if not, you're going to have students come in like the gal who came into my office and who didn't do well on her first exam, and I said, you know, well, let me see your chapter. And so she opened up her book and the entire chapter was pink. And I said, what do you do when you read your chapter? And she said, well, I highlight when I'm reading. And she didn't know that you highlight the most important information. So teaching highlighting or underlining is an important skill, and you just should not make the assumption that they would automatically know that you would highlight or underline only the most important information. This is QAR, question-answer relationships. That actually is an older strategy, but it's making a comeback, and I think for good reason. And the reason I think it's hinging on is that the Common Core is very much focused in on text evidence. So don't just give me the answer. You need to tell me where you found the answer. So there are different QAR relationships. One is the right there answer. That would be where the answer is found in one spot. You would call it a literal question with a literal answer. Then there's think and search, and that would be where you've read something and you can pinpoint the answer, but it's just not found in one spot. Maybe a little bit of the answer is in the first paragraph, a little bit is in the middle, and a little bit is at the end. Another type of text evidence would be author and me, and that means what's the author trying to tell me? He or she didn't state it explicitly, but the author got me thinking about going down this road, and based on my past experience, here's what I think. But you also have to cite the text evidence for that. Where did you think the author tipped you off to believe this? And then there are those kinds of questions that would require an opinion. You want to teach students how to cross off incorrect answers on a multiple choice test. So as you're reading a test question and then you read A and you say, oh, there's no way it's A. Mark it out. B, mark it out. Now I'm stuck between C and D, and then you can certainly start thinking through those two choices. But you teach the students how to mark out the wrong answers. Also, how to look for keywords in true-false questions like always or never. Those are important strategies as well. Highlighting keywords in questions. Again, how many times have I had a student who didn't describe and just listed? And again, teaching what those words mean and showing examples and non-examples. Here's what it means to describe. Here's what I mean by a list. And making sure that students don't miss points because they just didn't attend to the word that was in the test question. And then this is a really interesting one. Reading the end of chapter or comp questions before reading a passage. That's interesting because what it does is it gives the students a purpose for reading, and we recommend that before a science or social studies text or chapter is read, go to the end of the chapter, read over the questions, then go back to the beginning, and as you're reading, you've got those now in mind. You know what the big ideas are that you're supposed to draw out of the passage. Higher order thinking skills, we have to do a better job as teachers. We do this in Read to Achieve, and that is we start off at the low level of Bloom's with remembering, and then we ramp it up. By the end of the program, the kids are utilizing the pinnacle of the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, where students are creating and generating, planning, and producing. And again, we start off at 1 and move all the way up to 6, where students are doing much more higher order thinking skills. This is just a plug for classroom expectations. And again, you could utilize this with older kids, and we use this in Read to Achieve, ACEs, where it's an acronym where each letter stands for something for better behavior management. But the A stands for attend to the teacher, C, collaborate with your partner, E, express yourself through thoughtful comments and questions, and S, show your best work. And if you teach those and model those and catch students being good, so to speak, when they're exhibiting these, you're going to get carryover to, again, when we're saying college and the workforce, we want students to know what does it mean to collaborate with a partner, and what does it mean to show your best work, and what does it mean to express yourself thoughtfully, and even the attend to the teacher. So again, I think it's important to teach these things early so that when students are in situations where there's less structure, the students will carry over those good behaviors for better classroom performance. And we wanted to just end on this survey that was done, and it is 2009, so we've got the reference up there, but I just want to make sure that you all know, I mean, just aspects of Read to Achieve as an example, but just good, solid instructional programs. And what was done in this survey was that special ed practices were identified, and what you're going to do is see on the left the special ed practice. So applied behavior analysis, there's direct instruction, and it's defined as academically focused teacher-directed learning with sequence, structured materials, and high levels of student responding. So again, as a good example, Read to Achieve would be one. Formative evaluation, lots of student progress monitoring. Read to Achieve certainly has that. Mnemonic strategies, that has to do with like SQ3R, and we have that in there in Read to Achieve. Modality training is that see, say, do, as we talked about, only in this case it means pinpointing the kid as a visual learner, pinpointing him as an auditory learner, as a kinesthetic learner, perceptual, motor, and psycholinguistic and social skills. But what I want you to do is zoom in on the mean effect size, because the bigger the effect size, as you approach 1, you're talking about a standard deviation difference here. 0.93 is huge. Applied behavior analysis. Look at the direct instruction one of 0.84, almost a full standard deviation, meaning this is an important thing to use with kids who struggle. Formative evaluation, 0.70, that's certainly big. Look at mnemonic strategies, 1.62, and we use mnemonics in both the narrative and the content area program. Pinpointing a kid as a visual learner or an auditory learner is a 0.14. That's pretty much a wash, doesn't make a difference to just pick one. And that's why I really emphasize, make sure just every lesson you do has all 3 aspects. Perceptual motor, 0.08, that's basically a wash, not helpful. Psycholinguistic, 0.39. And social skills training, 0.21. Now, here are the findings in terms of frequency of responses for the special education survey. What are special education teachers actually saying that they're doing in the classroom? And let's look over at the almost every day, here's what I use. And take a look there. I mean, direct instruction is up at the 83%, huge. Formative assessment, 36. But see, like mnemonics is really small, and that's too bad, because look how powerful that mnemonic strategy was. And again, that's like the SQ3R or the PQCS that we use in Read to Achieve in the narrative one. Sort of surprising, and yet we need to be making some changes here. When you're looking at 57% of teachers would pinpoint the kid as a visual learner and only teach division, that becomes certainly problematic. But what we wanted you to zoom in on is that direct instruction is very, very popular. That formative assessment, certainly important, but mnemonics, we can do a better job of including those kinds of strategies in what we do. And then when you take a look at the order of frequency in terms of what you should be doing, the Cavalli and Forness would be the researchers who actually went in and made recommendations on what should happen as an example. But mnemonics, again, should be used, as we just talked about, direct instruction. But look over at special ed teachers. They're using direct instruction. Certainly look at school psychologists. Direct instruction is right up at the top. And again, we're talking about much more, I mean, these are explicit, sequenced programs that have more regimented kinds of ways of doing business, giving kids an opportunity to respond after it's been directly taught. So that whole I do, we do, you do approach. So just wanted to show you this, and we thought it was interesting to sort of zoom in on what folks out in the field are actually using. So in summary, we want to make sure that we align with the Common Core state standards, and we noted that college and career readiness skills are important. Beyond the book activities are certainly important and are called for. That we should focus in on more vocab and comp skills and strategies in order for students to understand their complex text. That study strategies like highlighting and using vocab cards and finding text evidence for the answers to their questions should be utilized. That we should teach students classroom expectations, that was the ACEs chart, so that they know how to be part of the classroom, performing the kinds of behaviors that teachers would value in the classroom. That academic literacy is critical. We should focus on science and social studies textbooks and more complex text, teaching kids to make inferences and draw conclusions, and getting kids to perform on the kinds of reading that they would actually need to learn to do if they're going to access your state level assessments. And we have those listed one more time. So that covers beyond the book. Hopefully just sort of the big picture here. Now it's sort of come to us sort of full circle as, you know, we've gotten one kid all the way through high school and now into college, and looking at the kinds of skills and strategies that she had going in. To me, the note-taking strategies were absolutely critical, not just from the textbook, but how to take notes from lecture. And I remember working on that with her. Those flip-flop strategies I know have proven to be very important and useful for her. But chief among those was the schedule book, so I have to smile about that one. So we'll open up for questions. If you have any questions, we'd be very happy to address those. Are there any questions? All right, well, we'd like to thank you for being a part of this webinar. Hopefully you learned something, and if you have questions, certainly let us know. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
The organizer has